G'day champions, we've got an Aussie made amp here, a vintage Aussie thing, a Sonata by Ace Radio. You can see it printed right there. They've even gone as far as to put the street address, 136 Victoria Road, Marrickville, their previous address anyway. I doubt they're there. These days that'll be converted into a craft brewery. Marrickville is like the craft brew centre of Sydney. All the hipsters hang out there. You know, with a beard like mine, you get free entry, probably a free beer too. And if you wear a flannelette jacket, you probably get two. Alright champions, here it is. 136 Victoria Road, Marrickville. It's now a mattress factory, mattress warehouse. Come upstairs and lay down. This is Marrickville. It's hipster central, lots of good bars. I didn't come here just to show you the shop. I'm actually down here for a gig. We're going to see the Peak Temple. Band that's been on a hiatus for 10 years. I think this is their first gig. I just thought it would be funny because it's just around the corner from where that amp was made back in the day. Whee! Ba-bow. The pickled monkey. Someone's pickled by the sounds of it. It's even got the phone number back when we only had 6 digits. So yeah, pretty cool little thing. Originally it was released as a combo. This has been converted into a head cabinet by the customer. So they just want us to go over. They've done some work to the amplifier itself in addition to building the cabinet and installing it. But they want me to run an eye over it. It's apparently performing not as expected exactly, but they also just want a bill of health so they can button it up and forget about it and just use the thing. So let's have a look. So it's got a quite beautiful little front panel there. It looks like a blue dye of some description. I don't think that's anodizing. It's probably a silk screen sort of deal with a very thin dye. But very nicely done and very neat and tidy. No evidence of you know, blurriness or smudging anywhere. However they did it, it looks fantastic. It looks, looking up close here, I think that would have been a silk screen, but you just don't see printing like that much anymore. It's really nice. You got a front accessible fuse holder, which is always a bit sketchy because as soon as it's in the user's face, if anything else goes wrong, they just shove a bit of foil in there. But this one's got a fuse. Seems a little oversized. Slow blow 1 amp. You'd probably be expecting with the output stage on this thing maybe a 500 milliamp slow blow. But we'll see what she draws when it's all set up, and we can adjust accordingly. Tiny little pilot light there, and it's actually got a removable, it's like a little lily pot bulb. Lily pot? I remember these used to be everywhere when I was a kid getting into electronics. As a kid you'd, I don't know, just something about really tiny little things. There's little toy lamps. It's like a baby version of the Fender one. It's kind of cute. Hopefully it's not blown because I don't know where you get one of them these days. So just a rundown of the setup. You got vibrato control, tone control, volume. So volume for 1 and 2, volume for 3 and 4. So it's doing in 1, 2, 3, 4. So mic and high gain, guitar and guitar. So I'm guessing, I'll have a look at the schematic, but I'm guessing you've just got slightly different input impedances to suit each. Maybe not. We'll have a look at what's in there and go from there. The point being, the configuration seems to be 2 volumes, then mixed together, and everything else is like a master control, but we'll confirm that by well, using our noggins. So the customer's gone with the brown nubtex. I really do like the brown nubtex, reminiscent of the brown panel fenders, and they've got one of those artificial leather handles on there, which are actually, some of them anyway, are actually kind of a better option than the leather ones, because the leather ones tend to just fall apart. You know, the ones you see on the tweed amps and the early champs and whatever. There is a company in Australia, however, that makes them out of multi-layered kangaroo leather. And apparently they're super strong, so I might reach out to them, or even talk to DSL Straps in Sydney and just send them one as a sample and say, look, can you make this as strong as possible, and maybe a little bit like larger profile where it goes through the brackets for my own amps. That way it'll have half a chance of surviving more than a year. Alright, so quick look at the back. One single jack on the whole back panel. Speaker. It's already been labelled and it looks to have one of those cliff style jacks. Got a foot switch, which I'm assuming is for the tremolo. Well, of course it is. Interesting. Got some copper wire and what looks like thin fencing wire wrapped around. Trying to hold the wire in place, not sure. But some rudimentary strain relief. But that's been cut off at some point, so we'll see if that's functional and maybe, I don't know, offer some way to close it up. The old plug's looking a bit filthy. The pin's pretty corroded and it's got the old school color coding there. I'm not sure when we changed, but we've changed to brown being active and blue being neutral, as opposed to back then when red was active and black was neutral. I think that's similar to some places in the world. The States, I'm not sure. No, States is white and black, but I think they used to be red and black at some stage too. Anyway, I should probably look this stuff up before talking about it, because I just sound like a dumbass. Like, more of a dumbass than usual anyway. Alright, so instead of going with the screws for a top bracket or a top plate or whatever, they've just gone with like corner brackets, and I guess they intend on screwing them out to those blocks. That'd probably work fine. I'd personally prefer a bit more of a mechanical connection with a bolt going through the top than sort of the shear connection there, which could remount the timber. And the top screw there is very close to the top of that block, so it could break out. But yeah, I'll have a think about that. It's probably adequate for this such a small chassis anyway. Alright, so I'm not sure if that's the original finish. Could be. It's remarkably clean in some places, but there is a little bit of wear around the edge, so that may be the original finish. And it's even on the bell housing of the transformer there. That's a Henderson transformer. Not immediately familiar with Henderson. I'm aware of Ferguson, and yeah, I'll have to look up the history of Henderson. I'm not sure. This transformer's only got a rubber stamp on top, no branding, so not sure about that one. And likewise for this one over here. So that's the choke, that's the output transformer, power transformer. We've still got two Elner caps here. And if this is a date code, not sure how to pass that, but you got 72 at the end. So does that mean the caps were made in 72? I'm not sure. There is an article on this company in ozvalveamps.org, so I should go on there and have a look. Let's do that. Alright, Jimmy, so here we are on ozvalveamps.org. Good site. Very good for obscure Aussie amps, Aussie and New Zealand. Ace Radio, Marrickville. He spelled it Marrickville, but it's Marrickville, Sydney, which is the factory I just showed you. So here it looks like the unit, at least in the chassis. Straight away you can see some differences. Vertical power transformer, different layout, and we've got octal output valves instead of the EL84s in this one. And you can see inside it looks completely different. That's the tricky part with Aussie amps. They'll have the same chassis, but literally no two amps left the factory the same. It's almost like they were making them up as they went, or experimenting. I've got a feeling they were just sort of throwing the darts at the dartboard and seeing which ones were most popular. They didn't. I don't think they really knew what they were doing in terms of tonality. They were just trying to produce signal and see if they could make some sales. So I think there was a bit of trial and error there and testing the market. So it's very rare that you see two identical amps from this era in Australia. So there's not a lot of info here either. The empty octal socket will be output to the speaker, similar to Golden Tone. So he's referring to that. They used to use they just used to use an octal socket as a plug for going from chassis to chassis. You've probably seen it on like Hammond organs and stuff. They did a similar thing. But they also used it for like speaker connections and stuff back before all this stuff was standardized. Similar to Golden Tone or Playmaster. So this here sounds like a bit of a guess. I don't think we'd be holding much weight in that. So bugger all information. Yay. That means if I want to do any meaningful modifications to this thing, or voicing changes or whatever, or tracking down any problems, this is potentially a bit of a liability in this job, because I'm going to have to draw out the whole schematic from scratch and just see if they've done any crazy shit that needs to be corrected. So yeah, I've already got some red flags. Sink several hours into this thing just to make it stable. It's interesting on this one, you can see they had the cutout for the horizontally mounted transformer, but they've mounted a vertical one on top of that. So maybe this is an aftermarket thing. Not sure. It's really hard to tell because the history's so sketchy on some of these brands. Carrying on down the preamp end, there's a couple of empty slots here. I guess there's other options like maybe reverb or whatever they had on some other of these amps that would facilitate more valve holes that aren't used in this model. And it looks like that's maybe the answer for our foot switch. They've just soldered it back on itself to make the tremolo always on. So that must be like a, yeah, like connecting the cathode to ground kind of deal, as opposed to shunting the grid to ground. So point being, some Fender amps, the tremolo will be active when the plug's shorted, and then other ones will be inactive when the plug's shorted. So that tells us a little bit about the trem oscillator, tiny bit. So the output valves, no markings at all on them. What often happens is people will find one of these amps in like a garage or something and they're dusty as hell and they get super excited and clean everything and clean all the dust off everything, and then they clean the writing off the valves in the process. So they look pretty much identical to EL84s though, so let's run with that. I'll double check the pin out because there were a few oddball valves that look similar from the era, but I'm 99% sure that's what they are, but we can also look that up. We've got a 6BL6, is it? 6BL8. That looks to me like a triode pentode. Okay, we'll look up data sheets. If you don't see these valves every day, you're sometimes not familiar with the codes. You need to look them up. Well, I need to look everything up because my memory's shit house at the best of time. Radiotron 12AX7, and we have something else. Dual triode of some description, and again we have some sort of dual triode, but can't read anything. So yeah, when you see a vintage amp, maybe just clean around the logo. Well, screw the logo, but clean around the valve type, not cleaning it off entirely. Alright, so a quick look starting from the preamp end. You can see some electrodes have already been replaced. We've got some Sprague atoms, most overpriced and silly caps in the world, but they do the job. They do work. I'm not saying they don't work. They just they cost about 4 times what you should be paying for caps, and some of them are only rated at 65 degrees, which is a bit ridiculous. So we've got a combination of tag board and point-to-point construction in this one. My two favourites not. Point-to-point can, you know, you can trace stuff out, but it's hard to securely mount things so they don't fracture their leads or solder joints. So you've got to do a bit of a wrap around. Don't wrap it around friggin' 360 degrees, just a 270 or a 180. But yeah, it's a bit harder to work on stuff quickly too. You've got to like fully clean the solder joints off and like unwrap the lead before you can remove the part, which is a bit tricky. Often a lot of techs will just cut the lead off and then just dab onto the existing blob of solder, which gets bigger every time you change your part out because there's another old leg in there. But I try to do things the right way. I know it's one of my faults, but I guess that's why people come back. Not with their amps broken again either. Now you can see here on the mustards, they often develop a little crack around here. And that often precedes them going leaky because all of a sudden they're not hermetically sealed, moisture gets in and allows a bit of leakage. So sometimes they're still fine, however. If it's a mission critical amp, I'd suggest to the customer we replace it, like if it's a studio amp or their main live amp. But if it's just a playing around at home amp or a hobby recording studio amp, we can often deal with it if something happens, if it's not in a catastrophic area, like I don't know, the output stage coupling caps or something like that. But I always just carefully check for leakage if there's any signs of cracking on any capacitor body, but it in particular seems to happen to these mustards. Alright, so a lot of the all the power supply filter caps have been either changed or paralleled. I'll get to that momentarily, but we've got all the original bypass caps. So if I say I'm doing a recap, I replace all the electrolytics because they're all the same age. Here you can see they're the same brand, Elna. These would have been from the factory as well, so for a couple of bucks we'll change them out too. Looks like one down here has already been changed out, so if one fails, can be from valve failure, but generally if one's failed, it's probably a good idea to change the rest of them when they're this vintage. Down in the corner we've got some local filtering for the front end, maybe for the tremolo stage as well, because here's an opto. Old school opto, no covering, just got a neon there with Bit of just mechanical support here offered by a wire that's been like glued with paint to the end of the neon bulb and soldered to the nearest eyelet. And then you've got a little LDR that's pushed right up against it. So if the cabinet's relatively light tight, that should work okay. It would be nice to have some isolation there to stop light from coming in. It just affects the depth of your tremolo. If you've got some ambient light, she's not going to be vibing too deeply, and who doesn't want that? So there's a lot of carbon film, which are probably fine. We'll check them for drift anyway. But a lot of these little carbon comps that love to go very high drift like more than double their value. But we'll check them all, and if they're still within tolerance, we can leave them in. There's not heaps of them though, so I might suggest to the customer that we just replace a few of them anyway. Just bring everything up to carbon film. Bit of peace of mind, you know. Won't be chasing ghosts in the near future. Alright, this I do not like. Here we've got the original. Just tracing this out of my head, bear with me, champions. So it goes to ground, that's the center, so we've got like a voltage doubler set up. And we've got some extra caps here. So these two reservoir caps are still in circuit. Given the age of them, I'd like to replace them. Again, it's sort of a matter of, if it's not a amplifier that's being used regularly, if they can deal with an issue when it arises, you can sometimes leave some stuff in for historic sake, but half the electrolytics have been replaced anyway, so we may as well replace these last two. The only tricky part is finding single section caps with this kind of profile that will clamp onto the existing clamps and suit the existing hole in the chassis. A lot of the time they're a lot smaller, so you can make adapters, you can use bits of rubber and stuff to sort of, you know, pack it out and use the existing brackets. There are ways around it. Ideally, you'd find a way to mount them inside where you can just silicon to the chassis or something like that, but depends on the construction, champions. You got some beautiful mains cord strain relief there, just like on the foot switch. So I might be putting a retention gland in there. And again, we've got the same old problem where we've got the active coming in, that's switched and goes straight to the transformer. These switches can melt, and if you've got a primary fault on the transformer, that could, with excess current, melt the switch, and then you're stuck with the power on. You've got to go pull it out of the wall. If you've got the correct rated fuse, and then you might blow a fuse, but if it's a ground active to ground fault and you don't have a GFC, GFC? No, that's global financial crisis. Ground fault current detector is what I'm trying to say, or an earth leakage detector. If you don't have one of them in some of the older venues, they may not. You could have an energized chassis and maybe a fire on your hands and a melted transformer. So what we want to do, same old, you know, broken record. We want to come into active, go to the fuse tip. From the fuse ring we go to the switch, from the switch we go to the transformer, and the neutral's just tied to the transformer. However, if we've got a dual pole switch, we can attach the active to one side, the neutral to the other side. Let's start again. However, if we've got a dual pole switch, we can go active fuse tip, fuse ring to one of the switch poles, and the other switch pole can switch the neutral on and off to the transformer as well. Just that's kind of the ideal case. We'll be connecting the safety ground more securely to the chassis than this little solder joint. So look at the front end. Got what looks like a tantalum cap in series with a resistor on the mic side, one on each channel, and then you got your usual 68k inputs like Fender on the guitar channel. Interestingly, down there's old leads left from I don't know if it's from the factory or what, but it's like they solder it at the convenient point. You can see there's a resistor there. Oh, of course not, there's a bunch of wires. There's a resistor down there, and they've soldered it near the body, but then they've just left the remainder of the lead down there, so that's a bit strange. I'll clean all that up, just in the rare case that something might go loose or touch something that's not supposed to. And you'll see down there the same deal, it's just leftover leads where they've been soldered near the component base. Yeah, a bit weird. Anyway, just a brief look at this one. I will document some of it and see if I can put it onto the osguitaramps.org. I think I tried to do that once before, but just was a bit hard to transfer the information over, people not sort of answering emails and whatever, but there is some information over there already on these models, and this isn't exactly original, so I don't know how historically significant it is. But anyway, I thought you'd just like a quick look at it before I get started, and I'll show you some of the finished product as well. Once it's finished, we'll do some sound samples. So until then, legends, take it squeezy.